Welcome into another edition of Gold and Black Radio. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. We knew it was going to be a decisive week for Purdue's Big Ten title hopes, but unfortunately, it may have been a decisive week in the wrong direction for the Boilermakers. With a pair of losses, we're going to pick up the pieces from those setbacks, not only to Michigan, but also the second Mackey defeat of the season to Wisconsin from over the weekend, while also looking ahead to a very difficult week ahead for the Boilermakers in East Lansing, and then, of course, the rivalry being renewed in Bloomington against Indiana. We're going to do so with Alan Karpick, who's pinch hitting for Brian Newbert. But first, a thank you to our terrific Gold and Black sponsors. That list includes Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner of Purdue Athletics and the official credit card for Purdue fans. Boiler Up, East End Grill and Ripple & Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street, the perfect place for your next event. The Whitaker Inn, this Midwestern oasis, is perfect for a relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway. Escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn. Sand Valley Resort, the Friends of James Beard Chef Invitational at Sand Valley offers a weekend of culinary delights as 8 Midwest chefs showcase their skills, enjoy exceptional food, friendly competition, and fundraising in a unique and unforgettable setting. As winter melts away, join us in 2025 for an unforgettable culinary journey with opportunities to taste and learn. Visit sandvalleypursuits.com/events/chef invitational to sign up. And finally, our friends at the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Purdue brings together world-class Boilermaker scientists from all across the university, conducting cutting-edge research that uncovers new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer. With your support, cancer research saves lives. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. Let's bring on the Grand Poobah, the goldenblack.com publisher, Alan Karpick. Like I said, pinch hitting for Brian Newbert, who's got a quick turnaround in East Lansing this week as the Boilermakers hit the road to take on Michigan State. And first, Alan, before we get to the list this week, let's talk about last week. Even though they let it slip late, I can live with the Michigan result, right? You know, it's a tough road game against a really good Michigan team, and it's kind of this back and forth game. Purdue had opportunities to win. They ultimately didn't. Disappointed in the result, but ultimately something that you could live with. But I found the Wisconsin performance to be very disheartening and really concerning. A bad afternoon for the Boilers, or something that you think should cause some deeper rethinking, maybe, scale of 1 to 10, let's put it that way. What's your concern level with that loss specifically to Wisconsin?
Well, I think in terms of the Big Ten championship, it makes it extremely difficult for Purdue to navigate its way to even a tie. Now, it's not out of the realm of possibility, and Purdue obviously has to win tonight against Michigan State. I think they got to win the rest of their games to realistically get a share of the championship. Maybe they can lose one, but I don't see Michigan losing 3 times down the stretch. I think the thing that was difficult about Wisconsin was not, you look at the numbers, it's nuts. I mean, Purdue only commits 4 turnovers. They shoot over 50% from the field. They hit better threes out than on Wisconsin. They just couldn't stop them, and that was what was disconcerting. Is give up 58 points in the second half. That's unheard of, and the inability to stop what Wisconsin's got to do, and to do it at home. But I will say this. I thought Wisconsin, of all the Big Ten basketball I've watched this year, was the best team I've seen so far, at least by the way they played that day. They just, on Saturday afternoon, they couldn't miss. But you can't – you do wonder about Purdue's defensive ability to stop the dribble and that need for a shot blocker, which isn't coming. We know that this season. Just somebody to defend in the post a little bit better. When Wisconsin shoots about 90+% from 2, you're not going to win a lot of games. But you're also not going to lose a lot of games when you have the numbers that Purdue had in that loss to the Badgers.
Is it as simple as just teams starting to figure out how to exploit them, where, maybe they didn't know in January, but now you've got 2 whole months, 3 whole months of basketball that you can go back on the tape and look and figure out, hey, this is how we can exploit Purdue backdoors, spread them out, or take advantage of the fact that, as you mentioned, they don't have that presence in the middle like they've had for so many years?
Well, I think you have to look at it too, though, that you got a team like Wisconsin, who's one of the best 3-point shooting team in the country, and doesn't turn the ball over. Michigan turns the ball over, and most teams are going to turn over. I know Michigan State tonight is somewhere, obviously in between Michigan and Wisconsin in terms of its ability to handle the basketball. But I just think that's a part of it that's really tough when you run into a situation where the team is experienced. Matt Painter talked about getting a lesson really in maturity And yet, Wisconsin's a little bit older in certain places, but not necessarily in winning experience when you think of the big three at Purdue. All of it adds up to it was a surprising loss. I mean, because at home, and the fact that the game in a lot of ways really wasn't in doubt in the last 5 minutes. I mean, Purdue was trying to get back into it, but just couldn't stop the Badgers. And I think you're going into that game, you felt even after the Michigan loss that Purdue was still in pretty good shape in the Big Ten race. That's no longer the case.
Yeah, it was one of those games where you felt like just one defensive stop could have gotten Purdue back in the game, and they couldn't get one defensive stop to make that, put some pressure on Wisconsin there because the baskets were just coming so easily. I've seen a lot of, you mentioned the big three, and they've leaned so heavily, especially on TKR and Braden Smith, but also Fletcher Lawyer in there has been a consistent, 12, 13, 14, 15 point per game scorer. And I've seen a lot of, Colvin and Heide have regressed this year. And I get that their shooting percentages have obviously gone in the tank, notably from even where they were in November, where early in the season, like out in San Diego, they were making shots and contributing on that end. I do think, however, Alan, they've improved in other areas, but the offense is what people want to focus on, especially when they're missing wide open threes, even though maybe Colvin is starting to figure out a little bit more. How do you view those two this season? And is there some unfair criticism in there for Camden Heide and Miles Colvin overall with how they've been in their sophomore seasons?
Well, I think, it's basketball's by definition is a game where you watch guys put ball in the basket. And when they don't do that, and you saw some things that Colvin and Heide could do last year, that's been disappointing to see them really struggle to make threes. Now, they both hit a couple shots in the Wisconsin game. You hope, if you're a Purdue fan, that helps their confidence, but you need that. And Matt Painter is not making excuses for his guys, but he is saying, in a 4 to 5 minute spurts, it's tough to make shots. And I know there was a lot of complaint in the Michigan game when Purdue did not score off the bench, but they only took 5 shots. So I'm not apologizing for him. I'm just saying it's not easy for him. And I think they both have, I do think they've both contributed for the most part to defensively in a way that helps warrants them to still be on the court. But yes, if Purdue's going to have an Elite Eight type run, and that's a big if, certainly. They're going to need somebody to be a wild card, I think, heading into the tournament outside of the big three. And Braden Smith, too. Braden Smith did not have his best offensive game. He needs to be in a situation where he's got to just look to score more. I don't know. The Wisconsin game was kind of a funny game. They ran people at him constantly. I thought that didn't make it easy for him to get easy looks. And that's been the case in some games this year, as we know. So that's what's an interesting strategy. And it gets back to your point, Derek, and that is there a little bit of a formula here that Purdue's got to work around? In other words, put a lot of pressure on Smith and force Purdue to do some things it doesn't want to do offensively, and get to the rack. That was certainly the success that Wisconsin enjoyed on Saturday afternoon.
Let's talk positives, and one huge positive from this season has been the continued strong play of Trey Kaufman-Renn, who's taken a massive leap from last year. It does remind me, and it's hard to compare anybody to a 2-time National Player of the Year, but it does remind me a little bit of what we saw from Zach Edey, not only year 1 to year 2, but year 2 to year 3, where he just really took off. What have you seen from TKR here, and is he now at the point where I think we had thought for a while Big Ten Player of the Year is Braden Smith's to lose, but has he, at the very least, I think, put himself firmly in that conversation, no?
Yeah, he has, as long as Purdue stays near the top. And I think that's another big thing. And even Braden Smith could lose that pedestal if Purdue. And Purdue's not going real far down the line, but you start to question things like, can they be a top 4 finisher in the league? And it always happens when you're on a 2-game losing streak and staring at an underdog in game 3. But yeah, he's been phenomenal. I mean, as Matt Painter said, you almost wonder when he misses shots, like what's wrong. He's been that good. And I think that it's been key to keep him on the floor. That wasn't a problem against Wisconsin. It was against Michigan, obviously, and Caleb First, where Purdue at the end of that game was a fish out of water, really, without those 2 guys in it in a lot of ways, though they still had a chance to win the game in the last second. But it's just there's not a lot of margin for error. Brian's talked about this constantly throughout the course of the season. You've talked about it. It's just that close in this league. And I still think even if Purdue doesn't win the Big Ten, if it finishes in the top three, there's not going to be a huge difference. I mean, let's face it. Michigan right now has got the inside track and then some probably to win this league, though they've got Michigan and 2 games to Michigan State left. But Purdue boat raced Michigan so earlier in the year, so they're not far from where they need to be. But it's still disappointing for a chance to, if you don't get that third consecutive Big Ten championship in one form or another, and that's looking to be doubtful at this point.
I guess the program's in a good place when you can say not winning the Big Ten championship somehow turns the season into a disappointment. But I do think that, I don't want to overreact, Alan, because we reached a panic point in every point of the season, right? It feels like outside of maybe last year, I don't think we got it. But I remember 2 years ago, the freak out after was it Northwestern and Maryland, I think, back to back. They lost those games. And then, they lose to Rutgers on the buzzer beater the year before that. And people are going nuts because it's December and, oh my God, the sky is falling and the whole deal.
Right.
But are they in a precarious spot here? Because, for a while, the season looked great, right? And you're thinking, okay, they lost Zach Edey, but they didn't miss a beat. But suddenly if they fall back to 4th or 5th of the Big Ten, and then you have a first weekend exit in the NCAA tournament, does that suddenly turn this season into some sort of a disappointment, or certainly something different than we thought it was going to be as little as 1 week ago?
Well, I think that you look at this, that's obviously going to state in the obvious. It's going to be how Purdue finishes, and including tonight. I mean, that's it. This is going to be a big step. Sunday in Bloomington too will be. You don't want to turn this into a 4-game losing streak. That may be a different conversation at that point. I still think this is a team that, if it can get the bye in the Big Ten tournament and get to the second weekend, I think you have a hard time calling this season a disappointment, especially with the play of Smith and TKR. But there was, a week ago, there was talk about, is Purdue a Final Four quality team? Matt Painter seems to think, he still keeps saying it, I like our guys. He repeats that consistently, and I think he really does. And I think that also means that this team still should be able to compete favorably, depending on matchups in the NCAA tournament at a high level. How high, Purdue's going to have to play well, but that's how the NCAA tournament works. I also think that, and I don't know, it's not maybe fair to say, but maybe that earlier schedule may have clouded things a little bit. But the only really loss it's been of any. I mean, I know you lost at home to Ohio State. I get that, and obviously Penn State back in December was a large spread. But the fact that the Wisconsin game was 10 points at home, that, like you said, it gets your attention and leaves Purdue in a precarious situation, only because we're going to see how Purdue reacts, not only tonight, but also on Sunday in Bloomington. And really, they got tough games everywhere you turn right now. I mean, I understand Rutgers is coming to town, but they've got 2 guys that can beat you. UCLA is coming to town. You just got to stay focused throughout and this is the dog days of February a little bit. And that's going to test a team that on the surface has a lot of metal to it with Smith, with TKR, with Fletcher Lawyer, but that's still there's still not a lot of margin also between the Boilermakers and other teams in this league.
Yeah, I think what it is, Alan, is that this was the first loss that feels challenging to explain away. And I understand that, the Penn State losses aged terribly, right? I mean, they've really had an awful season, but I think at that time you could explain that one away. And obviously it goes without saying, at Marquette, Auburn, those losses you can explain away. Ohio State even, I think, was a bit of a timing loss where you're coming off the West Coast trip and you're gassed and all, you know what I mean? Like, I think there were some things that you could point to and say, okay, this is why this happened. But, 72% shooting and 94 points, even to a really good Wisconsin team, I think just becomes a lot harder to just kind of brush off and on to the next one.
Well, I think, too, that Matt Painter brought up something in his availability on Monday, just talking about the fact that, Purdue, I think, has the least advantageous travel schedule. They have the least time to prepare in the Big Ten. Now, he's not, I think, or maybe it's Michigan State and Purdue are both right at the top there. that's not an excuse. That's the reality of now of having to deal with the way this schedule is. Everybody has to go through it. And it's really going to come down to, and it sounds overly simple, is can Purdue take it to another level or to a different level and adjust? And I think you're right. Getting back again to your point about how Wisconsin may have found something it could do to exploit Purdue. Purdue's got to counterpunch in some way if it's going to get to the level that it wants to get to end this 24-25 season.
Kind of putting you on a spot here, but last question, and I literally just saw this within like the last couple of hours. In honor of Tom Izzo breaking the Big Ten head coaching wins record, Fox Sports did a all-time Big Ten head coaches list. They still had Bob Knight number 1. They had Izzo number 2, but they had a couple of Purdue coaches on there, Coach Lambert, but also Coach Cady and Coach Painter, and they still had Cady in front of Painter. And Cady, I think, was at 5, and Painter was in front of 6. And my first inkling, Alan, and I know this sounds sacrilegious, is that I think I actually, if I'm making a list today, I think I actually might put Painter in front of Cady at this point. But I wanted to get your take on it because I feel like you could be the authority on this from having extensively covered both of those guys during their tenures.
Well, you know what opinions are like, and I think that's true. I think Matt Painter is and Gene Cady was terrific and did a lot of great things and stood up to and competed favorably against Bob Knight. But boy, if we get to if Matt Painter gets to the 25-year mark, I think you're going to like his record better than Gene Cady's. Maybe because of it's a different time. We all know that's 25 years different time. But and Cady went through a lot of things, but Matt Painter has been unique in terms of where he's gotten this program, and I think where this program is going. I mean, let's face it, the Purdue was number 1 for 3 consecutive years in rankings. That never happened under Gene Cady. Yes, Gene Cady won 3 consecutive Big Ten championships and again beat Bob Knight head-to-head in the most competitive of times. Indiana wasn't that as competitive in the Painter era, at least to date. But I would give that nod to Painter at this point if you really are, and you're really asking me, so I'm going to say that's what I would say. But I'm going to take it out to 2030 and let's see where we are. Let's come back and do this show there, and then when Painter's at 25 years, and I'll give you an absolutely definitive answer. How about that?
If he stays on this track, I think by 2030 it's going to be kind of a no-doubter. But I think just with everything that happened last year, especially in that breakthrough, I think that felt like almost, Zach Edey handing the net to Gene Cady almost felt like somewhat of a passing of the torch type sort of moment for the two coaches. And it's so funny because if you ask Matt Painter, he would say, "Oh, of course it's Cady." If you ask Cady, he'd say, "Oh, of course it's Painter," right? Because those are the type of guys that those two guys are. But it's fun to have those discussions. And
it is, and it's a little apples to oranges, but not completely. Sure. And the good thing from a Purdue perspective, and again, you don't know the next 5 years and how the world of college basketball and NIL and all that's going to work, and what players you're going to have available to you. It seems as of today that the Painter formula gives Matt Painter a chance to have it's a Hall of Fame level career, and getting to the Final Four probably seals that for him. But also all that he's done in the world of college basketball has been important as well.
We'll see if that formula can get the Boilermakers back on track starting tonight in East Lansing and then to Bloomington this weekend. You can catch Brian Newbert's coverage, his rap, his video analysis, and, of course, the Drive Home in the Card pod right here at goldenblack.com, and we'll get Brian back on the show next week. But, Alan, appreciate you filling in, and we will talk to you once again soon.
Yeah, just call me the Vic Davalillo of pinch hitters. That's an old reference. I'm sorry, man. Oh, you're enough of a deep You are a baseball enough to know that, but I know there are a lot more modern references. But Brian will be up at the tonight and doing his work, and we look forward to that.
Yeah, I know that's a baseball player, not a pizza chef. So
there you go.
There. Thanks so much, Alan. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Derek.
That's Alan Karpick, the publisher of goldenblack.com. And that's our show, Golden Black Radio, brought to you once again by our friends at the Purdue Federal Credit Union, the official credit card for Purdue fans. East End Grill and Ripple and Company, 2 distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street in Lafayette. The Whitaker Inn for unparalleled comfort and cuisine. Visit the Whitaker Inn. Sand Valley Resort. Join us for the Friends of James Beard Chef Invitational at Sand Valley. It's an unforgettable culinary journey with opportunities to taste and learn. All you have to do is head to sandvalleypursuits.com/events/chef invitational to sign up. And finally, the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. And of course, don't forget to sign up. Become a member of the best Purdue coverage right here at goldandblack.com, not only for Brian Newbert and Tom Dienhart, the usual guests on this show, but also our friend Alan Karpick, for Carm, for me, for Knucklehead Central, for the whole deal. Hitting the stretch run of the regular season, it's going to be even more fun in March, and then we'll get into spring football and Tom bringing everything to the table as far as Barry Odom and the new regime for the Purdue football program. This would be a great time if you're not already to become a subscriber right here at goldandblack.com. But until next time here on Gold and Black Radio, I've been your host, Derek Schultz, and we'll see you next Tuesday here on the show.